Hi everyone, this is Jim. Happy Halloween everyone. I have a special feature today. The game I wanted to show you is Minchev against Petrov from 1994. This was Chess Game's Game of the Day, and it was chosen because it features the Halloween Gambit. Grigor Minchev, by the way, is an interesting player. He's a pretty strong player, rated 2300 FIDE, and which is FIDE Master Strength, although he doesn't have a title. But anyway, quite a good player, and he uses this gambit to good effect here. And in many games, he sort of specializes in this gambit. So the Halloween gambit comes from the four knights defense. So we get into the four knights. So you could get into the four knights from either order. The knight could come out to c6 first or to f6 first, but as long as both sides get all their four knights out, then this is a four knights defense. And the Halloween gambit is the move knight takes e5. So definitely a crazy looking move, and it can't be right, but at the same time it can be difficult to play against. So the history of this gambit, it was written about as far back as 1888, when Oscar Cordell wrote that the Leipzig club players were using this gambit, which they called the Müller and Schultz gambit, which there weren't any club players named Müller or Schultz. That was just those are just common German names, so sort of like calling it the Smith and Jones gambit. Anyway, it's been analyzed since then, and generally there have been a couple attempts to refute it, but it's not entirely refuted. It's just that I guess if you play correctly, black can get a decent game, but not a forced win. Anyway, you should probably take, even if you're going to give the piece back later, there are various ways to give it back, various points later in the game that it's better to give it back. And d4, this is the idea. Just building up a big center and gaining a lot of tempo by kicking these knights around. And now here's one point where you could play a different move. You could play bishop d6 here, defending the knight. And if there's this exchange, you've given the piece back, you've gotten your pawn back, and it's an okay position. You have to watch out for this f4 move, but you have the escape. You don't want to fall victim to the fork, but you have the escape of taking over here, and may even be possible to play queen to e2 and pin the pawn. But anyway, the other way that white has to play, which is kind of interesting, is he doesn't have to take right away. He can play the move f4, and this is really a threat. The threat is to take the knight, and then the pawn from that position will also be forking the bishop and the knight. So it's a threat not only to win the piece back, but to win another piece as well. So now the knight has to drop back, and then e5, and white gets his piece back that way. And so this is a way of these are ways of giving the piece back, and they lead to okay play for black, so you can get a reasonable game out of it. But if you're going for the advantage, you probably want to try and hold on to the pawn, which black did here with knight c6. The knight can also play to g6. Those are the two moves, knight c6 and knight g6. And you get into similar problems in each case. If you go to g6, white pushes on with e5, and if you go to c6, he pushes on with d5. And now the knight goes to e5 here, occupying the hole that was created, but it gets kicked again immediately with f4. Knight goes to g6, and now e5. And this knight goes all the way back to g8. And in fact, this is the position. If the knight had gone, if this knight had gone directly to g6, then e5 would have been played, and this knight goes to g8 in that line too. So this is actually a standard position in this opening. Although by this point, white has gained so much space, he's probably got adequate compensation for the pawn. Anyway, he keeps pushing on with d6. There's this exchange. And opening up dangerous lines to the king, and also creating a couple of weak squares here. So queen to f6, an attempt to get out, and also attack this pawn here, trying to get rid of that nuisance pawn. But white defends it with knight b5. Not only defends the pawn, but also threatens to play knight to c7 check, forking the king and the rook. So rook to b8 was played. And this actually turns out to be a mistake. At this point, to keep an advantage, black needs to play a move like knight to h6, get a piece developed, and just give up that rook in the corner What you get in exchange by giving up that rook in the corner, just to illustrate, let's see, the knight goes here. Knight here, check. King runs. Knight takes. What you get is you get to grab this pawn, and then this knight is trapped, and you've got a little more development than you have in the game. So that's a way to try and keep something for black, but very difficult to play. And anyway, rook b8, a natural move, actually gives the advantage to white at this point in the engine estimation. White continued with bishop to e3, annoyingly looking at that pawn there. b6 was played, protecting the pawn, and oh, the rook was going to be trapped too if that pawn was taken, also giving some squares for this bishop to develop to, so he's got a little bit of development. But now queen e2, the next big blow, setting up threats along the e file. And now notice the queen can't go to e6 to block this. You would like to do that. You don't want to have to move the king, but there's no. First of all, any other square you block on, you're giving a piece back, and so white recovers his piece and has a good attack. If the queen goes to e6, there's this knight c7 check, forking the king and the queen. So the king has to move to get away from this threat. And now white just castles queenside. So white is perfectly happy. He's been playing on all this time, just a complete piece down, and he's already amassed pretty much a winning advantage at this point. Black tries queen e6 now, trying to pin the bishop, and there's no longer a threat from knight to c7 because the king is not getting forked. But f5 kicks the queen away from that square, sacrifices another pawn, but getting the queen off of that good square and freeing up white's queen to come over here to the c file. Having made threats on the e file, it now switches to the c file and threatens to come in on c7. And this is really dangerous here. The queen tries to cover with e5, also still with the idea of trying to wrap up, grab this pawn somehow, but it seems just too well protected at the moment. We've got a knight and a rook on it. So I think most moves, I guess all moves are hopeless at this point. So queen c7 was played, the king went to e8, and now white could just grab the rook in the corner, but he chose to continue attacking with bishop to d4. Queen went to f4 check, king b1, and now rook to a8, getting away from the attack of the queen. Rook to e1 check, and notice that the queen is guarding all the escape squares, so he really has to give a piece back at this point. He puts his bishop here, and instead of taking right away, white just keeps piling on the threats with moves like g3, kicking the queen. The queen goes here to d2. A nice aggressive posting for the queen, threatening mate, by the way, taking the rook, that would be mate. And, well, it's putting pressure on the bishop. The bishop is defended. But you always have to respect that mate threat. So white defends against the mate by placing the bishop on g2. So the rooks are defending each other. But this bishop is just loose here, and black grabs it. He really has nothing better. And white grabs the the bishop here. So the material balance stayed the same. Black has 3 pieces and white has 2 pieces, so he's still got his extra piece. and now he finally got rid of that nasty pawn. But unfortunately, there's no time to breathe a sigh of relief because white has a mate in 2 here. So if you want to pause and check it out, see if you can figure it out without looking at the answer on the right-hand side. That's a little puzzle. Okay, I will go ahead and show the mate. It's knight here, check. King to f8's only move, and queen there is mate. And so the king, surrounded by all his pieces, but none of them are in position to defend. The awkward knight somehow can't move back and block the check, and these pieces are blocking the escape from the king. So he's mated at home by the queen. Okay, so that's how the game ended. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.